Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello there. Good morning. Happy Monday to you, March 26, 2012. I guess this is the last week in March, and then we're into April. And believe it or not, that cold, brisk weather you might have walked out into today is seasonal. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm freezing to death. I practically put on snow boots. Yeah, that's it. That's the real deal. All kinds of news today. It's going to be a heavy news week. I'm just going to give short shrift to a lot of things because I'm going to get to a guest for you later in the show, but I want to give him a big hunk of the show. He is Stephen Hirtle. He's a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, but also a member of a group called the City Skeptics. And that is a group that is, rather unsure, if not absolutely certain, of the... well, that won't work. I can't say that. Wait. A bunch of atheists is what they are. And there was this rally in Washington, which got short shrift in terms of coverage, so you might not know about it. But on Saturday, there was tens of thousands of like-minded, irreligious folk gathered in D.C. to let people know that America is full of non-believers, too. But they don't have a very high profile. So we'll talk to him about that and the fact that atheists are getting a little bit more aggressive. I'm beginning to think that Jane Orie is going to beat the rap. Anytime a jury is struggling as much as this one is, and reportedly a juror sobbing, and notes to the judge saying they can't reach agreement, and could they find her guilty on some and not guilty on others? And, of course, yes, they can. I'm surprised they didn't know that going in, for God's sake. That's sort of a basic, why wouldn't the judge have told them that? But he has now, or she has now. I don't know who the judge is, frankly. But the very fact that this jury went all through the weekend, all through yesterday, they worked all Sunday, took 2 15-minute breaks, have had all meals brought in. They lasted into the night last night. I mean, this jury is working. And obviously there is not a unanimity of opinion. Wow. So, also Jane Orie, of course, is not one of my favorite people. Speaking of not my favorite people, Dick Cheney has a new heart. I have always maintained that he never had one to start with, so this is amazing. I was forwarded a joke, and I'm sure there's many jokes at his expense. This one, and I'm going to say a bad word in it, so I'm forewarning anybody who doesn't like bad words, or words that are classified as bad. This you would not have seen in the paper. Dick Cheney's doctors made medical history today when they managed to fit a human heart inside an asshole. There you have it. Actually, I think that pretty much says it, doesn't it? What else we got? You can ride for free under the Allegheny River today. That's something else. The tunnel is up and operating. And the U.S. Supreme Court, this is the biggie. And this is the story that's going to, I would imagine, occupy much of the news coverage of this week, barring any unforeseen, between the growing outcry over the killing in Florida of why am I blanking on the kid's name? Trayvon. That's right. Trayvon. Excuse me. Trayvon Martin, and the Supreme Court taking up the Affordable Health Care Act. Is that what it's really called? Obamacare, as we know it. 3 days of, what constitutes 3 days. It's actually 6 hours of oral arguments over the next 3 days by the Supreme Court. And then they're going to sit down and decide this baby. And I got to tell you, if they find it unconstitutional, it is such a gift to the Republicans in this presidential year that the mind reels. If I don't know, with the court as it currently is constituted, I have no faith in it. I think most judicial experts looking at the law think that it is in fact constitutional. But this court is very political, and I'm scared, frankly. And we can shake in our boots awaiting the decision all through April, all through May, and all through June, because it's not expected that the decision will be handed down until the end of June. So that's going to be a nail-biting season. I found some interesting things in the papers over the weekend that I wanted to share with you, and for all I know, you found them too, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But there were two little items that caught my attention because they're counterintuitive. What they're telling us is something that doesn't you wouldn't, left to your own devices, think would be the case, I think. And that is these increasing studies, study after study after study, plus just crunching real numbers that show that violence in this country is going down, and that trend is now a long-standing trend. And despite the bad economy, despite every negative thing that you could argue you would think raised crime rates, it just keeps going down. And it's not just the United States. In almost every nation in the world, the statistics show that there is less violence. We look at the world and it seems to me there's so much violence, the head spins. But did I say head spins already today? Why is that in my head today? Maybe because my head is spinning. The media, what constitutes news, is, we're told over and over again, the unusual. Dog bites man is not news, although, frankly, tell that to the local stations. Man bites dog, that's news. planes landing on schedule or just landing without killing anybody is not news. Planes crashing is news. It is the unusual. But because news is the unusual, it can skew the perception for the viewer of what, in fact, is real and what's happening out there. So that people who watch a lot of news and night after night see stories about bad people, people shooting people because if it bleeds, it leads in newscasts. And local news has become much more enamored of this kind of easy way of filling a newscast. So that if you watch that news constantly, your sense is that never before has there been so much violence, when in fact it is absolutely the opposite. But what is counterintuitive is that the studies are showing that ever since our popular culture became more violent, in other words, what we think of as entertainment, my kid sitting in front of with a video thingamajiggy in his hands and engaging in disgusting games in which people are blown away, you would think that would make him more violent. And parents worry about the violence the kids see, the violence on our television screens, the violence in these video games, this culture of violence. But in fact, since the video games have come into our children's lives, violence, actual violence, has gone down. That's the counterintuitive part. Because, as you know, people have decried these games because of what they assume the impact would be on children. Now, I don't pretend to know if, in fact, a little kid playing these games all the time would not become inured to violence. But I remember when I would suggest it to my child when he was a teenager, he would say to me, "Mom, it's not real," with this sort of disgust in his voice that I somehow didn't know the difference between real and unreal, real and virtual. So these people who look at this stuff, sociologists, psychologists, or whatever, are starting to think that these violent games and the violent movies and the violent TV shows actually are acting as a safety valve so that young boys with lots of testosterone in them and maybe nowhere to put it, now put it there into a game so that no one actually is killed. And they, because of the realistic nature of these games and because of the sense of control that these kids get when they're playing them, they can relieve themselves. I guess it's not unlike, it just occurred to me, some men, mostly, sitting on the internet looking at pornography. It's a way to release these, these urges in a way that no one gets hurt. Although you could argue with pornography that's not the case, and I'm sure some people could argue that even with these video games that's not the case. But there was this article in yesterday's PG that I thought was just fascinating about it. It appears that man's, bloodlust, which is just sort of obviously part of our makeup, can perhaps be somewhat, if not totally, sated by fake blood, by pretend violence. But this global trend is fascinating because in the U.S., a lot of people would say, "Oh, it's because we've gotten tough on crime. We got all the criminals in jail now, and that's why the crime rate is low." Well, the fact of the matter is that in countries that have nowhere near the draconian, punitive justice system that we have, where they incarcerate their populations at the rate that we do, you are finding the same kind of downward trend in violence. And in cities where there's poverty, where one would expect that this would be a place where where there would be increased violence as the economy went sour and other kinds of things. It's not true. It's not happening. New York City is one of the places in the U.S. with the most dramatic decrease, so that the homicide rate in New York City is down 80%, 80% from 1990. That's amazing. And let me tell you something. While the rest of the country was locking up people faster than ever before, New York actually was lowering its rate of incarceration during this period in the last 2 decades. So there again, it wasn't that they were throwing more people in to jail. In fact, they were doing the opposite. They were finding alternatives. Also, the number of countries using the death penalty has declined worldwide, along with violent crime rates as well. Countries that do not have the death penalty show an even greater decline than we do. So all these idiotic things that we constantly do, thinking we're making ourselves safer, incarcerating millions of Americans, 3 strikes and you're out, getting increasingly punitive, all because we want to safeguard ourselves, killing people, executing them, blah, 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 blah. Other countries that don't do any of that stuff, they see the same decline. Fascinating to me. And looking at the numbers, even liberals like us who think that poverty and inequality are where the seeds of criminality can can find nurturance and grow. That doesn't seem to hold up either with this downward trend, because as we know, while the trend of violence has been going down, 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 inequality, economic inequality in the country has been going up, up, up. Rising unemployment, which you think might add to crime rates, has not had an impact on the just stubborn downward trend of crime. So it's fascinating. And one of the things that really they think might be helping in some way is there's, as I said, there's like safety valve stuff where people who might be prone to violence can do it in a virtual way. Just want a few other facts if you didn't read this thing. According to the United Nations, looking at 94 countries, the drop in violence has been extreme. I mean, it's just been extreme. 2001. Homicide killed more than twice the number of people than war. Homicides killed twice the number of people that were killed in war. That is in 2001. In 2008, those figures drop markedly, both in war and in homicide. And again, I point out that the rest of the world has not fallen in love with mass incarceration and execution as have we. So that's not what it's about. I find it fascinating. Okay, the other sort of counterintuitive thing I saw was this little item. And this is from The Economist, but reprinted from a blog. Since the terrorist attack of 9/11, Islam in the United States has flourished. Has flourished. The number of mosques since 9/11 has nearly doubled in the United States. Now, you would think, right, that after 9/11 there was a suspicion about Muslims in this country and blah, blah, blah. But here, it's the United States of America. So even though it was Muslims that attacked us on 9/11, Muslims here, since then, have not only continued to grow, but have continued to actually build their faith community. In fact, nearly doubled the number of worship sites. Isn't that counterintuitive too? But doesn't that speak well of us? Isn't that emblematic of the best of America? I think. Makes me feel proud. And then there's just one other little item, which is totally off these subjects, that I wanted to note. This came from the One Pittsburgh blog. The Republicans were meeting at the convention center recently to celebrate their Lincoln dinner. Abraham Lincoln, as you know, the first Republican president. But it was pointed out that even though Abraham Lincoln, probably the most beloved American president, was a Republican, there is very little similarity between Abraham Lincoln, his beliefs, his politics, and the current Republican Party. It's night and day. And they point out, this article points out, for instance, that the Republicans gathered at the convention center to celebrate themselves and Abe Lincoln are the guys who worship capitalism, right? They worship it. And these are the guys that don't pay any attention to labor. Labor's the bad guy all the time with Republicans, right? Breaking unions, that's what they're about. Fighting any regulation to safeguard American workers. Making things easy as pie for the bosses, for the capitalists, is what Republicans are all about. That hardly needs to be said. But here's a quote from Lincoln. Here's a quote from Lincoln from his State of the Union address in 1861. And in it, he clearly comes down on the side of the worker, of labor, of the 99, and not the 1. Listen to the first Republican president on the issue of the value of capital and the value of labor. Abraham Lincoln, quoting from his 1861 State of the Union speech. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration. Can you see a Republican president saying that? For that matter, can you see a Democratic president saying that now? Maybe. Maybe. How far we've come since 1861, huh? So when I talk about the Republicans wanting to repeal the 20th century, I've now seen that they actually want to repeal the 20th and 19th. They've got to get back all the way to before the Enlightenment. And it was Enlightenment thinking, which of course was at the base of our founding fathers' perception. They want to go way back, way back. And what's amazing to me is they don't see it. They don't figure it. Beyond belief. Okay, just one other note. James Cameron, who we talked about a few weeks ago, who built his own submersible thing that shoots down like a rocket, has pulled it off. I haven't seen an update because I think it was yesterday late that he rocketed down nearly 7 miles to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and there he stayed for hours and apparently taking pictures, and whatever he comes up with will be the first pictures humanity has ever seen of our Earth down at that level. He's further down than Everest is up. He's in a dark world that none of us know. Now, in 1960, 2 guys did get down there, but whatever they were in, as it hit the bottom, threw up so much dirt and sand and stuff that they couldn't see a damn thing, and then they had to get out. So there's never been. They didn't see anything. They get kudos for being the first down that level. But Cameron's coming up with pictures, as of course you would expect a Academy Award-winning director to do. But he's also clearly an inventor. This is an interesting guy. And now I understand maybe more his grandiosity, where when he won that Titanic Award, what did he say? I'm king of the world. I think he said that. Isn't he the one? Whatever. Okay, I got to get my break in. And then when we get back, we're talking to Professor Stephen Hirtle, the University of Pittsburgh. Also, one of them damn atheists. Okay? After this.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
Pittsburgh City Paper's annual music guide is available now. Pick up one today for an inside look at the music scene in Pittsburgh. Plus Tosca, The Monster in the Hall, and Go Radio. Pittsburgh City Paper available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com. Go to bergbargains.com for great deals to Vegas. bergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's only online deal site where the deals don't expire. bergbargains.com.
Hey, Billy.
Yeah?
Do you want to go to the state fair?
Yeah.
Do you want to ride the roller coaster?
Yeah.
The big one?
Yeah.
The one with the reverse flip?
Yeah!
Well, you can't. You see, Billy, when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have done with it, including going to the state fair.
Oh, man.
Cheer up. This year, your parents will make it right. They're going to visit EnergySavers.gov, where they'll get tips on how to save energy and money. Then they'll add extra insulation and get a few of those Energy Star appliances. They could save hundreds of dollars a year. And you know what, Billy?
What?
They'll take you to the state fair next year.
But I want to go this year.
I know you do, Billy. I know you do. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Now, it's back to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com.
Here we go. You don't have to wear these, I don't think. Alrighty, we are back, and as promised, I am joined by Professor Stephen Hirtle of the University of Pittsburgh. He teaches information science, and he is also a member of City Skeptics, which is, I was thinking, though,
Yes.
skeptics. A skeptic is somebody who's just skeptical. So,
Right.
I mean, I would think an agnostic is a skeptic, but an atheist is a true believer in something. What do you think?
Well, it depends how you define atheist. And I think you're taking a little strong of a dogmatic view. And in fact, Richard Dawkins even says that on a scale of 1 to 7, he's a 6. He's not all the way at the
Wow.
end. And you cannot believe that, you don't know that there's not a God.
No, you can't. You guys can't prove your position
Right.
any more than the Pope can prove his.
Right. But you can say that it's very improbable, that there's little evidence and there's little reason to change your life because of what you think a God might do or say, because you don't really know.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me that you say Dawkins puts himself as a 6 on a scale of 7.
Yes.
Because I would have thought he'd be a 7 for sure.
And the other analogy he gives is he talks about fairies in the garden, that there might be fairies in the garden, but you don't change the way you garden
Okay.
based on fairies. But you can't prove that they're not there.
This is true.
So you don't worry about the fairies in the garden and what they're going to do at night. You just go.
But you could try to set up infrared cameras.
You could try to do
and
that.
try to capture those
You
fairies
could,
doing
if you really wanted to. Exactly. So he's agnostic to God in the same way he's agnostic to fairies.
Now, Richard Dawkins is
Yes.
a British scientist. For those of you who don't know, he wrote Your Bible.
It's been called that by some.
What's the name of his
The God
book?
Delusion.
The God Delusion.
Yeah.
And he, along with, I'm thinking it's too bad that Christopher Hitchens wasn't here.
Yes.
I am still a big fan of Hitchens. And he, too, was a very, very, wouldn't you put him as a 7 on a scale? I can't imagine.
I think he's the same way. That you
Really?
you
can't.
just don't know.
But Dawkins.
But you don't change your life.
Okay, so Dawkins was one of the big cheeses, maybe the biggest name that you had at this gathering on Saturday in D.C.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting that depending on who was counting or who was covering the event, I've seen 8,000 atheists gathered. I've seen 10,000 atheists gathered. I've seen 15, 20, and even up to 30,000, which is what you guys, of course, are embracing. The 30,000 were there. But never before have so many atheists descended upon the nation's capital and said, look, here we are.
Here we are, yeah. And it was a fun event. It was a positive event. And the analogy was sort of a coming out party. Just tell people you're an atheist. Let your neighbors know in the same way that the gay movement really changed the world when you realized,
I can
person
say
down the
this.
hall?
I can say this.
Yeah.
So you think your suspicion is, and I think I would agree with it, that there are a lot more. I'm going to say agnostics.
You can say agnostic.
There are a lot more agnostics out there than people think, and in fact, a lot of agnostics belong to churches, belong to synagogues. A lot of them. I would argue there's some rabbis and ministers
There are
who
rabbis and
are
ministers.
agnostics.
One was on the TV news yesterday.
Oh, really?
Sunday morning, yeah. MSNBC did a wonderful coverage, thoughtful coverage about what this movement is all about, and talked with a pastor who just came out this weekend.
He came out. So you're thinking, and I think it's smart because the gays showed it's very smart. Come out. Everybody, come out, wherever you are.
Exactly.
And then you have power. And then you stop the demonization that can go on of your belief.
Yes. And we're 16% of
is that
the latest surveys is 16% are non-religious, as they say. They just don't have they don't have any religion. With young people, it's more like 25 to 30%.
So it's growing.
And it's growing.
Your numbers are growing.
Their numbers
and
are
the
growing.
crowd in Washington was mostly young?
It was all ages. Yeah, yeah. Families, older people, even the people on stage. Jessica Alquist was 16. She's this wonderful young student from Cranston, Rhode Island. You might have talked about.
Who had the courage to take on, her high school?
Her high school that had a prayer on the wall, which was illegal, and the court said it was illegal, and as a result, she was just called nasty names. She was, one of the state senators called her an evil little thing after she won the lawsuit. And so a bunch of people had "I'm an evil little thing" T-shirts. Those big T-shirt. I'm an evil.
And I
little
saw a
thing
lot of
too.
people were carrying banners. "Hi, Mom, I'm an atheist."
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Coming out to your parents.
Yeah.
So what do you think? My guess is that one of the things that might be shoving more people out of the closet in their skepticism is the just growing. I mean, who would think it could grow? The growing aggression of the believers.
Yeah.
And the rise of the sort of fundamentalist believers.
Yeah.
And the fact that Rick Santorum appears to be running for Pope as opposed to president.
Well, and as you know, this is where it probably got a little bit testy, but the question that was raised by a couple speakers was, how can he be a presidential candidate given his views and what he believes? That if someone doesn't believe in evolution, how can we elect that person president of the United States? You know, there are some basic facts about the world that we have at hand, and that you should be embarrassed if you say these things.
But as you know, you who live in an ivory tower, as you know, the number of people who believe that climate change is some conspiracy is actually growing. It's not.
Right.
The dimwittery continues to increase. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Because obviously our side is not doing the job that the know-nothings are doing.
Well, and there's a feeling that you can't criticize religious belief. And at least a couple people at the rally, Richard Dawkins was one of them, said, you don't criticize religious people, but you...
Well, he said, he said something that I do not agree with. What did he say? He said, this is something I read.
Yes.
He said, ridicule and show contempt for their doctrines and sacraments. Now, right, that's not saying for them, yeah. But to ridicule and show contempt. I'm wondering, is that a way to win people over?
It's a touchy thing.
I would think that that's not the way.
And personally, I would just like to see it not brought up. And I was thinking about an analogy. If you go to UPMC and you're looking for a doctor, mm-hmm. and you look through the directory, you see where they got their degree, what their specialty in. If there was a category that said religious views, it would look very strange to you.
Yes, it wouldn't have anything to do with it.
If you look at the teachers at Kappa that teach the kids, you might also get some of that same information. If you saw what their religion was, you would go, why is that on the teacher?
What does that have to do with anything?
So why do we do that with the presidency?
We didn't used to.
And why do we do, and all the other candidates?
But
we want to know what their religion is. I don't want to know it. I want to know where they got their degree, what their views are, what their policies are.
We didn't used to in my lifetime, and I ain't an old crone exactly. Right. In my lifetime. It's even been pointed out that when Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, the governor mm-hmm. of Michigan at the time, made a run for the Republican nomination back in the late 60s, there was no talk about the fact that he was a Mormon.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't used to do this. Although, if no Jew would have.
The problem is every president was Protestant.
Right, every president was, exactly, Protestant. So that all it took was John F. Kennedy.
And opened up the door.
Or Al Smith before him, and it did. So there was a sense that only presidents have to be Protestants, and then JFK broke through that, but we're still at the point where you have to be Christian.
Yeah.
And to say you're not a Christian, do you know, is there anyone who has been elected to the Congress of the United States, or for that matter, a governorship or a Senate? Is there any that has flat out said, I'm not a...
Peter Stark is the only one who says he's an atheist, and he's said that after he's been elected.
And who is he? Peter
He's,
Stark is
California
Congressman.
Yeah.
But it was
and it was well after. He's been there for 20 terms and
okay, so
about
he can
10 years
afford
ago.
to come out
and
as
he
a
lists himself
non-believer.
as a Unitarian Universalist.
Okay.
So, which is a good sign that he might be.
In fact, I think most Unitarians are atheists.
Or a lot of them are, yes.
Yeah.
Right. You know, they started with the Pledge of Allegiance, which was really interesting, with an honor guard. But in honor of the World War II veterans, they started with the World War II version of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Without under God.
And so it ended one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I heard that, and it almost brought tears to my eyes.
Do you know, I was watching an old movie the other day. Was the one with Jimmy, what's his name from Indiana? Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart.
Where Mr. Smith goes to Washington or something. Maybe that was. And they at some point in that, they do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was blown away because it was, there it was, and there wasn't under God in it.
Right.
And that came in, actually, when I first learned it, I learned it without under God. I had to relearn it maybe in second grade or third grade.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, because of the godless commies we were fighting.
Yeah, it was McCarthy who's
we had to
respected now in our history, But
right. Under God.
Yeah, and I might as well say one nation divisible, with liberty for some. If we, it really was a beautiful pledge that kind of got destroyed.
I'll tell you, I blame Jimmy Carter, frankly, for some of this religiosity in our political discussion. And maybe I'm wrong because I'm no historian. I'm just going based on my memory. Mm-hmm. I don't recall until him this sort of wearing of his Christian faith as part of who he really was in a presidential candidate. I think Carter was the first one to do it.
That might be. That's an interesting point.
And he still, it informs his, he is an extremely religious Christian. Mm-hmm. I would also argue that his Christian faith is a Christian faith I admire because he's focused on peace and, the really, I think, good teachings of the church, of which there are obviously many. Mm-hmm. His Christianity was not objectionable to me, and yet it was objectionable that he was constantly talking about it, and I noted it and thought, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And then when even one of my own, because I'm a Jew, Lieberman gets into the possibility of being president as the Democratic vice presidential candidate, and he is wearing his religion on his sleeve, making a big to-do about the fact that he's a modern Orthodox Jew, a true believer. He won't walk he has to walk to the Congress because he won't take and I thought, who cares? I don't care about this crap.
What did you say about showing derision to beliefs?
Oh, excuse me. No, I think when you really start, and I have done it, that is true. I have you take the mythology of any religion, like people make fun of, you know what these Scientologists believe? And they start talking about, I don't know, rocket ships and this is and that's and all. And I see the Christians howling about this. Yeah. How could people believe such a thing? And then you sort of point out, excuse me, look at what you believe. Right. And, you actually believe, if you're Catholic, that you're drinking the blood of Christ, that you're eating his flesh? Mm-hmm. Give me a break. Or as a Jew, and I am a Jew, that I believe that Moses parted the Red Sea and that, burning bushes and all the trumpets and the walls came down and, all this Noah's Ark.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah. Adam Savage gave a great speech. He's one of the Mythbusters, and he was just entertaining, and he made that distinction between facts and beliefs. And a lot of people mix them up and sort of think, well, this is true because I believe it, whether it's true if it's a fact. Mm-hmm. And then there's facts that they actually don't believe, which you can't really do. And in fact, what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, the great thing about facts is that they're true whether you believe them or not.
That's right. That's right.
And if anyone's interested, I mean, I saw this morning about 300 videos on YouTube that everyone was filming speeches with their.
So it's all out there.
Yeah, it's all out there.
Because it sort of got short shrift, I think, in the. I didn't see anything. I don't watch TV news, but I was watching. I was reading my papers. I read lots of newspapers. I didn't see a dang thing about it.
They were a little frustrated with C-SPAN because they chose not to broadcast the speeches, and they had broadcast a number of Tea Party events and other events on the mall, and so we don't quite know why that happened.
Well, so. You're an eclectic group demographically, and even maybe in belief, because there's different levels,
yes.
right?
Different labels that people like to use.
And a lot of people will say, I'm not religious, but I would say I'm spiritual. Could you still be an atheist and say something like that?
I think there's a feeling that we... atheist is one of those words that really is a negative, has been a negative term. Julia Sweeney in her Letting Go of God play that she did a one-act play, and she talked about becoming an atheist. And her mother, who was devout Roman Catholic, was talking to her in the kitchen one day and said, you know, I don't mind that you don't believe in God, but an atheist?
I don't mind that you're getting paid to have sex, but a prostitute?
Exactly. Yeah, there's some. So I think that word has sort of worked. And again, may we go back to the gay community of just sort of bringing, saying that I'm queer. Just take a word that's been
and own it.
And own it.
Right. Right.
But I think really the divide is between those who believe in a dogmatic faith and those that are just kind of exploring and looking for different answers. So spiritual is sort of depends which side of spiritual, but I don't think they believe in the...
I think spiritual can even be somebody who walks out, on a sunny day and spends 5 hours looking at a flower and says, wow, this is so amazing. Who just are overwhelmed by the complexity and beauty of the world, has no idea how the hell any of this got here,
right.
And is, I think, humble enough to acknowledge that they don't know how anything got here.
There's strong evidence that things like meditation, things like, obviously, a sense of community, all of those things build a better person. So there are practices that are helpful.
Okay, you just said something interesting to me,
yes.
Because one of the things that faith communities do that is very positive is build community. And
the problem is we don't have a model here of a non-faith community that does it. And if you go to Sweden, if you go to Norway, you go to even England, particularly the Scandinavian countries, which are the least religious in the world right now, and they are the most supportive. They have social groups. They have a health care. They provide health care for everyone. In every
they do all these
measure
Christian things for each other.
Right, respecting other individuals.
Yeah.
They are at the top, and they're also the least religious. And they do it through community groups, community organizations. And we do that the food bank is probably one of the greatest helpful groups in Pittsburgh. I would say it's at the top of the list. Non-religious. Doctors Without Borders.
Right.
Non-religious. So there are examples out there. They're just not the ones that necessarily come to mind.
Right. But I also think, don't you, that most people, and I think it can be very important for children, a sense of some ritual in their lives. I think I would argue that can be very important for a feeling of, I don't know, place and security and all that. And churches and synagogues offer that to people and structure to people. And it looks to me, because so many people are religious, that a lot of human beings desperately want structure like that. I think atheists obviously don't need it. They're more comfortable with a sense of sort of chaos. I think religious people want What is this? Jimmy Carter left the Southern Baptist Church because of their treatment of women. Jane wrote that on Facebook. He did? Yeah, but he still was religious as all get out. Okay.
Well, I think part of the groups, and there's a bunch of groups in Pittsburgh, the Steel City Skeptics, there's the Center for Inquiry, and they do a variety of things like a lecture series, a book group, a discussion group, social events. We get together every December for a big Festivus party. We're trying to figure out how to get families involved. Part of it is just the numbers that are not quite there yet. But there are secular camps. There's a camp inquiry that CFI runs. That's specifically a week-long camp in the summer. And so I think that's probably the next step. I agree with that.
Do you think most atheists grew up in a religious household, or did you? Were you raised in a
slightly religious? Yeah.
Yeah, but you went
nominal
to
religion, and then we moved around a lot, so it sort of fell by the wayside. Perhaps if we were in one city, it would have not have happened. There was a Putnam has done some surveys on this, and he said the most common, those who don't believe in religion generally have one parent from one religion and one parent from another religion. So you get someone who's Catholic who marries someone who's Jewish, they have kids, and the kids are happy not believing.
Well, often because the parents don't agree on a religion
Right.
or it just looks like a mishmash. You just described my sister and her husband. Mm-hmm. And I know when they first married, they didn't know what to do with their children. So they went to, and I bet this is a place rife with atheists, the Ethical Cultural Society.
That sounds
right?
like it. Yeah, I don't know about it. But
yeah. The Ethical
Buzzword.
Cultural Society, which had like a Sunday school and all this kind of stuff. And there's a story that I always loved. My brother-in-law, the Catholic, went to pick his son up at the Ethical Cultural Sunday School. And as they're riding home, he said, well, what did you learn in Sunday school today? And this little 6-year-old pipes up, deeds. Not creeds. And my brother-in-law said, well, what does that mean?
Right.
And the little kid thought for a minute and he said, well, the creeds, they're the bad guys.
That's really funny.
Deeds,
really
not
funny
creeds.
thing.
The creeds,
Yeah.
they're the bad guys. Well, I don't know. That kid, however, did grow up to ask to be bar mitzvah.
Okay.
As did his sister. Weird, sort of siding with the minority religion of the two. But
Right.
I doubt if his children will be very religious, although he's doing a Passover Seder in a few weeks. I don't know. And there again, that familial ritual. I also would doubt, he's a scientist, I would also doubt very much that he actually believes in the existence of a God.
Well, the Unitarian Church is a great place for that, and they have they do have a good family program for those that really want a structure. Yeah.
I know. I've told my rabbi that I have a lot of trouble believing in any of this stuff, and he seemed totally nonplussed, which is not what you get in some congregations.
Yeah, right.
So
we're having the secular meeting coming up next week too.
Okay, on your calendar, you godless radicals.
Yeah.
Next week,
Tuesday, April 3rd,
Okay.
6:30, Clapp Hall Auditorium in Pittsburgh.
where's
At
Clapp Hall?
It's right across from the Cathedral of Learning. It's sort of the Holiday Inn is across the street.
Oh, okay. I know exactly where it is then.
Yeah.
So it's on Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue.
Okay. Clapp Hall Auditorium, 6:30.
6:30.
Next Tuesday, not tomorrow. A week from tomorrow.
Week from tomorrow.
And what's happening?
And the CFI, which National Group, Center for Inquiry, wanted to do a meeting on secularism on campus and how it's growing. And they looked at places to hold it, and they thought Pittsburgh was the perfect place because there's 3 major universities, CMU and Pitt, which have active atheist groups, and Duquesne, which
Which tried to.
and was denied.
Yeah, that happened this year?
Yeah, it was in the fall. So
I mean, it's not that there's not atheists at Duquesne. It's just that they were not allowed by the university to become a bona fide campus organization.
Right. Yet they have a Jewish group and a Muslim group that are recognized.
So Duquesne will allow any religion. You have to be a believer.
You have to be a believer, but they don't.
Well, that is interesting, isn't
And that's
it?
not true at all Catholic universities. DePaul University in Chicago, which is Catholic, has a very strong secular group there.
Huh.
So it varies from university to university, college to college. And so a couple of the students are going to be there with a panel and discuss about their experiences, why they want to have a secular group, why it's important, what are the activities that they're involved in. And then there's going to be a keynote speech from Barry Cosman, who is a demographer who's the one who has done the American Religious Identification Survey and is considered the most reliable survey of what do people believe, what are the distributions. And so he'll be sort of presenting the landscape of
And he's coming from a neutral territory, though?
Connecticut.
Or?
Well,
no.
No.
So is he too? He's a non-believer.
He's a non-believer.
So are his numbers trusted?
His numbers are trusted because he's at Trinity College in Connecticut. He's a professor there. So it jives well with other studies that.
And
have been
generally,
done.
he's finding that Americans are becoming less religious.
Americans are becoming less religious in the last 10 years. The younger you are, the less religious you are. And there's one of the interesting data points that I love is they ask people, are you religious? And you get 75%, or 80% that say they are. And then you say, do you want a religious funeral when you die? 30% said no in their survey. 30% said no. So you sort of wonder, exactly how religious are you? Like you say, I'm a Catholic, but you want or whatever the religion is, but you want a religious? No. I'll just, when I die, just put me away, whatever, have a party, but I don't need a funeral. And so when you start looking at religion, it's really not a yes/no. There's a very gray area.
But and my guess is, and this is why
okay. I got you thinking. I saw the wheels spin.
Well, yeah, but when you were talking about coming out, my guess is that knowing human nature as I have through my life, most people don't want to be separated from the group. And so, you're going to say, sure, I'm religious, because that's where everybody seems to be, right? I think and as you say, it takes a great deal of some courage or contrariness to stand outside this very loud crowd of religious.
It's part of your culture. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, outside Chicago, and so I would describe myself as a Midwestern. But what does that mean? I mean, just sort of heritage. And I think people do the same thing with religion. It's sort of where their roots are, what are the holidays they celebrate, and we do a lot of that. It doesn't mean that it's deeply held beliefs.
I have friends who are atheists, and
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. Wait, but here's what I'm getting. They blew me away because they have a Christmas tree every year.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell are you doing with a Christmas tree?
Yeah.
Well, because they grew up with Christmas trees. They like Christmas trees. It makes them happy.
Yeah.
They do a Christmassy dinner.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, I don't know. I guess that's not unlike early Christians taking pagan holidays and taking them on because it's part of what they knew and what they know, and it gives them some pleasure and comfort.
And there's a wonderful singer-songwriter, Tim Minchin, who's was at the Reason Rally, and he sings a song about why he celebrates Christmas.
Oh, he does
and
still.
How terrible he doesn't like the words, but he likes the music. And
the music is beautiful.
Yeah, right.
And I, as a little Jewish kid, grew up singing Christmas carols, and I love them.
He's from Australia, and so it's summertime there, and so the name of the song is White Wine in the Sun. But it's a just wonderful Christmas song from an atheist.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, listen, most of the great Christmas songs on our end come from Jews.
That's true. White Christmas.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
Yes.
That's right.
Can I give a website that people can go to?
Well, of course you can.
So if you're interested, there's an umbrella group called the Coalition of Reason. And so Pittsburgh, COR for Coalition of Reason. It's just one word.
It's not PGH, it's Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh spelled out, COR.org.
Okay.
And that lists all the groups and has a calendar, and urge people to contact us and come to an event and get involved.
And so the thing now is, atheists, you guys, you people who don't believe, you're supposed to come out.
That's right.
Well, it's smart.
That's right.
It is. And I think it's interesting, though, what I find interesting is that as this sort of fundamentalist Christian stuff takes one of our parties and, creates this sense that, the Christians are this strong, huge group and that this is a Christian nation again. They're pushing back. It seems to me they're pushing back if the demographics are showing that they're actually losing. They're defensive. This is a defensive, maybe, on their part, that they're getting louder and louder and a little more hysterical sounding and talking about a war on religion because they are aware of increasing secularism.
Fox News had an article on the rally, and the title of it was Rally for Nothing in Particular.
Well, there you have it.
Most of the other articles were quite positive and reflected it well, but there were some people that didn't quite understand why we were out there.
So do you think this will be a yearly occasion? It'll
be interesting to see.
Just as there's a pride parade maybe you guys need to just keep plugging along and
there's lots of individual events that are scattered out, and those will continue, and I think those will continue to grow, whether there's another national event or whether they wait another 4 years and do it every year on election years or whenever, although it wasn't political necessarily. It was just
Well, I want to thank you for coming. Stephen Hirtle is a pointy-headed, liberal, intellectual, godless commie, apparently.
Yes, exactly right.
He's with the Steel City Skeptics. And give those websites again for people if they're interested in checking anything out.
If you can just go to the Umbrella website. It's www.pittsburghcor, which stands for Coalition of Reason.org.
And this big event a week from Tuesday is at Clapp Hall on Fifth Avenue across from the Holiday Inn at 6:30. And sounds like, it's national decided to come here.
Yeah.
Sounds like an interesting discussion will be had.
Right. And if students, if there are students from other campuses that want to be involved, let us know. I mean, we knew about the 3 campuses, but there might be Carlo.
I don't think there's any atheists at Carlo.
I don't know.
Or
they're everywhere.
La Roche.
They're everywhere.
Oh, my God. I don't think so. My God. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Tomorrow, my sister Susan joins me again, and we'll talk about, I don't know, I got a feeling we're going to talk a lot about the Supreme Court and Obamacare this week. So hope you can join us. Have a good day.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.